Yeah, we need to talk about Donald Trump's tariffs because he is doubling down on them, with him now saying that he is going to impose tariffs on products coming into the US from Mexico, Canada, and China on his first day in office. With him in one of his social media posts claiming that thousands of people are pouring through Mexico and Canada, bringing crime and drugs at levels never seen before, and then specifically saying he'd issue a day one executive order to levy a 25% tariff on all goods from Canada and Mexico. And finally, adding this tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. And then in a separate post saying that China will be charged an additional 10% on top of any existing tariffs on all of their many products coming into the United States of America. And again, saying that tariffs will stay in place until something is done about drugs coming into the US. Now with that, one of the first things I'll touch on is that at best, a number of the things in these posts are misleading. Or like, for example, unauthorized border crossings in general have been falling since before the election, and they're continuing to do so. Though it is true that crossings at the northern border have been increasing. And while obviously we do not want people that should not be here bringing crime and drugs into the country, what he's saying is at best hyperbole, right? There's no evidence right now to suggest that migrants are bringing crime and drugs at levels never seen before. In fact, multiple studies, including one recently from the National Institutes of Justice, have found that undocumented immigrants commit crimes at lower rates than citizens. And then regarding the drugs, fentanyl seizures have actually dramatically increased under Biden compared to Trump. And so now with that, the country is actually seeing significantly less fentanyl in circulation and fewer overdoses. So obviously we want to see those numbers getting less and less and fewer, but also either way, most fentanyl is reportedly smuggled through official border crossings by Americans. In fact, more than 80% of the people sentenced for fentanyl trafficking at the southern border are US citizens. So again, in no way am I saying there is not a huge issue, right? It is absolutely true that Mexican cartels and Chinese gangs linked to the CCP are playing a huge role. And it's definitely not like we can't talk about whether other countries can do more, but also to do that properly, we have to be clear about what the facts are. And so with that, let's get back to these tariffs. Because it is not true with Trump's tariffs that Mexico, Canada, and China are gonna be the ones paying for them, right? As much as Donald Trump has insisted that foreign companies pay tariffs, they're actually paid by the company that imports the products. And in many cases, that cost is passed on to American consumers. And that is especially true in this case, right? And that's because Mexico, China, and Canada, together, they account for more than a third of the goods and services both imported and exported by the United States, supporting tens of millions of American jobs. Also, notably, little thing, imposing tariffs on Canada and Mexico would violate the terms of the trade agreement that Trump himself signed in 2020. And with all this, it's important to understand this is not a one-way street. Starting with the fact that, while other countries don't technically pay the tariffs, it doesn't mean that they won't be hurt by them. In fact, a number of the people who support Trump saying all this stuff about tariffs are saying, oh, he's playing this game of chicken, right? And that because, for example, the Mexican economy could be hit especially hard since it's so dependent on American trade, exporting about 80% of its goods to the US, right? And all this is other countries can also play the tariff card. Right? You just had a spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in the US saying, China-US economic and trade cooperation is mutually beneficial in nature. No one will win a trade war or a tariff war. Right? And so one, with that, there's concern that these countries could respond with tariffs of their own, or two, otherwise be less inclined to cooperate on issues like immigration and drug smuggling. And again, to that point, you had Mexico's president, one, suggesting her country might retaliate with tariffs of its own. And this is two, she pointed out that Mexico is actually dealing with an influx of weapons being smuggled in from the States. But again, all of this, as there are some who believe that this is just a negotiating tactic from Trump, right? And even perhaps a bluff. But on the other hand, you have some saying we should take him at his word. With, for example, a professor of trade policy at Cornell telling the New York Times, the increasing specificity of Trump's tariff threats, both in terms of the amounts and the countries to be targeted, indicates the strong possibility that these are looming actions rather than just blustery threats. But hey, for now, we're gonna have to wait to see what happens. We're a little less than 2 months away from Donald Trump taking over the presidency again. Personally, at this point, especially because the man is no longer campaigning, I say when he says something that he's going to do, believe him. And in the meantime, maybe start just taking pictures of how much stuff costs. And in particular with this situation, I'd say fruit's probably the easiest, because annually, I think we import about $18.7 billion of fruits and veggies. Though arguably the bigger exports are things like auto parts, vehicles, electronics, also beer. But yeah, I guess we'll see. Hey, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this clip from the full Philip DeFranco show. And also a big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring our Clips channel. Turn your passion into profit over at squarespace.com/Phil, or use the QR code. Because whether you're launching a business or a lucrative side hustle, your website is your digital business card. It's the only space where you control the story, no algorithms or distractions. And with Squarespace, it's so easy because they got a ton of stunning professional templates with drag and drop editing that makes site design incredibly simple, no coding required. So get started for free at squarespace.com/Phil, or scan the QR code on screen and use code Phil for 10% off when ready to launch. Squarespace.com/Phil.